There was a woman standing in the middle of Gate B-24 at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, and nobody looked at her twice. That was the thing about Cecelia Vance Hartwell. At 63 years old, she had learned, through decades of hard living and harder lessons, how to be invisible when she chose to be. She wore a plain navy cardigan over a white blouse. Sensible flats, no jewelry, except the thin gold band she still wore on her right hand, even though her husband Bernard had been gone 7 years. Her rolling carry-on was scuffed at the corners. Her reading glasses were pushed up on her head. She looked like somebody's grandmother, waiting for a connecting flight to somewhere unremarkable, which, to be fair, is exactly what Leonard Croft decided she was the moment he saw her. Leonard had been a senior gate agent with Meridian Airways for 11 years. He was the kind of man who wore his uniform like it was a military decoration. Pressed slacks, lapel pin perfectly centered. He stood behind his counter at Gate B-24 with the posture of someone who had confused authority with arrogance so long ago that he could no longer tell the difference. Cecelia approached the counter quietly. She placed her boarding pass on the desk without a word. Leonard didn't look up right away. He finished typing something, took a slow breath, then glanced down at the document in front of him. "This is the priority boarding lane," he said. "I know," Cecelia said. "I have a priority boarding pass." Leonard picked up the boarding pass the way you'd pick up a piece of trash you weren't sure belonged to you. He studied it. His eyes moved from the pass to the woman in front of him, then back to the pass. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite suspicion, not quite contempt, but something that lived in the neighborhood of both. "First class," he said. Not a question, more like a statement he didn't fully believe. "Yes," Cecelia said. He set the pass back on the counter. "Can I see your ID?" Cecelia opened her purse and handed him her driver's license without complaint. She had learned long ago that complaining in moments like this only gave people like Leonard what they wanted, a reason to escalate. Leonard looked at the ID, then at her, then at the boarding pass again. "There's been a seat reassignment," he said. Cecelia was still. "Excuse me?" "We've had to move some passengers around due to weight distribution on the aircraft. Your seat has been reassigned to economy." The gate area wasn't crowded yet. Maybe 30 people scattered across the rows of seats, but the few who were close enough to hear had gone quiet. An older black man in a business suit glanced up from his laptop. A young woman in airport scrubs stopped scrolling her phone. "I purchased that seat 4 months ago," Cecelia said. Her voice was even, remarkably even. "I understand that, ma'am, but these things happen. We can offer you a travel voucher." "I don't want a travel voucher, I want my seat." Leonard's jaw tightened. He had the particular expression of a man who had expected pushback and was now using it to justify what he'd already decided to do. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to step aside and let me assist other passengers while we sort this out. There are no other passengers in this lane." The silence that followed was the kind that makes bystanders hold their breath. Leonard straightened to his full height. He reached across the counter and placed one hand on Cecilia's carry-on, the scuffed one, with the worn corner wheels, and slid it approximately 2 feet down the counter and away from her, with the casual authority of a man who had never once been told no. "Step aside," he said again. The older man with the laptop had fully closed it now. The woman in scrubs had put her phone in her pocket. 2 more people had drifted closer without quite meaning to. Cecelia looked at her bag sitting there, displaced, her cardigan folded neatly on top. Her whole life for this trip packed inside. She looked at it for exactly 3 seconds. Then she looked back at Leonard, and she said nothing. That was the part that nobody in that gate area could quite explain afterward. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't reach for her phone. She just stood there with a stillness that was somehow louder than anything she could have said. Leonard took that stillness as surrender. He was wrong. "I'll need you to move to the economy check-in counter, which is—" "I'll wait here," Cecelia said, "until your supervisor arrives. I am the senior gate agent for this flight. Then I'll wait for whoever is above you." Leonard laughed. It was a short, dismissive sound, the laugh of someone performing confidence for an audience he assumed agreed with him. "Ma'am, I've been doing this for 11 years. "I assure you, I've been doing mine for 34, Cecelia said. "I also assure you." Nobody knew what that meant yet, but something in how she said it made the older man with the laptop lean forward just slightly. Leonard picked up his desk phone and made a call. He spoke in a low, controlled voice, the kind people use when they want to sound professional while doing something that isn't. When he hung up, he looked at Cecelia with a tight smile. "Security will be here momentarily to help you find the correct check-in area." "Perfect," Cecelia said. She pulled her carry-on back toward herself, adjusted her reading glasses on top of her head, and waited. 2 airport security officers arrived 4 minutes later. They were young, mid-20s, both of them, and they had the slightly uneasy energy of people who had been called to a situation that didn't quite match the description they'd been given. The taller one, whose name badge read T. Ose, looked from Leonard to Cecelia and back again. "What's the situation?" Ose asked. "Passenger is refusing to comply with a seat reassignment and is causing a disruption," Leonard said. Ose turned to Cecelia. "Ma'am, are you?" "I purchased a first-class seat on Flight 2247 to Washington Dulles 4 months ago," Cecelia said, calmly, clearly, as if she had prepared exactly these words. "I have not been given any documented reason for a reassignment. I have not been shown any airline policy supporting this decision, and I have not been disruptive. I have been standing here." Ose blinked. He looked at Leonard. "Do you have documentation for the reassignment?" Leonard's composure flickered, just for a second. "The system flagged her seat for. Can you print the documentation?" Another flicker. "The system is, I'd have to, because if there's no documentation," Ose said, in the careful tone of someone choosing words very deliberately, "then I'm not really sure what I'm here for." The second security officer had taken a small step back. The older man with the laptop had stood up from his seat. And that was the moment Cecilia's phone buzzed in her purse. She didn't check it. She didn't need to. She already knew what it was. What Cecelia Vance Hartwell had not mentioned. Not to Leonard, not to Ose, not to anyone in Gate B24 that morning, was that she was traveling to Washington, D.C., because she had a 9 o'clock meeting the following morning at the headquarters of Meridian Airways. Not as a passenger, not as a customer. As the newly appointed chairman of the board of directors, she had been voted in 6 weeks earlier, following the retirement of the previous chairman, a man named Howard Fisk, who had spent 20 years building the airline into what it was, and had specifically recommended Cecelia as his successor. She had spent 34 years in aviation, starting as a ticketing agent at 29, working her way through operations management, international partnerships, 3 different carriers, and 2 decades of board-level work that had taken her to airports on 5 continents. She had been quietly brilliant for so long that most people in the industry knew her name without knowing her face. Leonard Croft was not most people in the industry. Leonard Croft was a gate agent in Atlanta who had made a decision about a woman based on a cardigan and a scuffed suitcase. The phone call that now buzzed unanswered in her purse was from Meridian's Atlanta operations director, a woman named Priya Akasan, who had been alerted by someone in the terminal. Not Cecelia, who had told no one, and was now making her way to Gate B24 with the particular stride of a person who has just been told something they cannot quite believe. Priya arrived at the gate before Cecelia answered the phone. She was 41, efficient, dressed in a Meridian management blazer, and she walked directly past Leonard's counter. Without looking at him, she stopped in front of Cecelia. "Miss Hartwell," she said. I am so sorry, I just heard." The gate area went very quiet. Leonard's hand, which had been resting on his counter, went still. "It's all right, Priya," Cecelia said. Her voice hadn't changed. It was the same steady register it had been for the last 20 minutes. "I was just waiting." "Your seat is..." Priya turned to look at Leonard for the first time, and what passed across her face was not anger exactly, but something worse, the look of someone recalculating a problem they hadn't known existed. Your seat has never been reassigned. The system shows it as occupied and confirmed. Leonard opened his mouth. Don't, Priya said, just the one word. Leonard closed his mouth. Osi had taken 2 steps back. His colleague had found a reason to look at a point approximately 8 feet to the left of everyone. Priya turned back to Cecelia. Can I escort you to the lounge while we prepare for boarding? We have about 25 minutes. I'm fine here, Cecelia said, but thank you. Priya nodded slowly. She understood what Cecelia was doing. She didn't argue. Then Cecelia turned to Leonard. The gate area had by now accumulated perhaps 60 people. Some of them had witnessed the whole thing. Most had arrived in the last few minutes and were piecing it together from posture and proximity and the particular charged silence of a situation that hasn't finished yet. I'm going to ask you something, Cecelia said to Leonard, and I want you to think about it honestly. Not for my sake, for yours. Leonard said nothing. His face had gone the color of old chalk. What did you see when I walked up to your counter this morning? No answer. You saw a woman in a plain cardigan with a worn-out bag. And you decided that woman did not belong where her boarding pass said she belonged. You didn't check the system. You didn't ask a question. You decided. And then you moved her things. She paused. Not for drama. Just because she wanted the words to land where they needed to land. I've been flying since before you were in this uniform, she said. I have been moved, redirected, questioned, and dismissed in more airports than I can count. And every single time I made a choice. I could fight loudly, or I could wait quietly and let the truth do the work. Today I chose to wait. She picked up her carry-on. She straightened her cardigan. I'll be speaking with HR before my meeting tomorrow morning, she said. I want that noted. She turned to Priya. I'll take that escort to the lounge after all. Priya nodded and fell into step beside her. Cecelia Vance Hartwell walked away from gate B24 without hurrying. Without looking back, the gate area remained quiet for a long moment after she left. Then the older man in the business suit sat back down, opened his laptop, and, though no one else saw it, smiled to himself. Leonard stood at his counter. He was still standing there when his supervisor called. And then his supervisor's supervisor, and then, eventually, a woman from HR whose tone was professional and careful in the specific way that professional and careful becomes when something has gone significantly wrong. He had 11 years of service with Meridian Airways. It took 6 business days to process the end of them. Priya Aitchison filed the incident report herself, at Cecilia's request, with one addition that had not been discussed. She included the account of T. Osi, the security officer, who had noted in his own report that the gate agent had provided no documentation to support the reassignment and had displayed, in his professional observation, behavior inconsistent with standard passenger handling protocol. It was, in the dry language of official documents, a thorough account. In plain language, it was enough. The older man in the business suit turned out to be a retired federal judge named Elwood Carter, traveling to see his grandchildren in D.C. He didn't know who Cecelia was when he watched the whole thing unfold. He didn't find out until he read about it. 3 days later, when the story had traveled, as stories do, from word of mouth to social media, to a short piece in an aviation trade publication, he told his daughter that night on the phone, I watched her stand there for 20 minutes and never once raise her voice, and I thought, that woman has been through things I can't imagine, and she is still the most composed person in that room. His daughter shared the story with her book club. The book club shared it elsewhere. By the end of the week, the phrase, I chose to wait, had shown up in comment sections and text messages, in a way that neither Cecelia nor anyone who knew her had anticipated. She saw it once, in a comment thread she had no business reading at 11:30 at night, before her board meeting, and she sat with it for a while in her hotel room in Washington. Her husband Bernard had been a man of very few words. In 31 years of marriage, he had offered her exactly one piece of advice that she had carried like a stone in her pocket smooth from handling. He'd said it to her the first time she'd come home from work shaking. She was 34, and a regional manager had questioned her expense report in a meeting in front of 12 colleagues in a way that had nothing to do with the expense report. Bernard had listened to the whole story, and then he'd said, "The truth always needs more time than the lie. Give it the time." She thought about that in the hotel room. She turned off the lamp. Downstairs, the city was doing what cities do, moving, grinding, never entirely quiet. The next morning there was a board meeting. There were 11 people who would sit around a table and look to her for direction on a company that moved 400,000 passengers a day through the air. She wasn't nervous about any of that. She was thinking about a scuffed suitcase on a counter in Atlanta, and a man who had looked at her and decided in 30 seconds what she was worth. And she thought, this is the thing about assumptions. They don't just cost the person who makes them, they reveal something. Something the person usually doesn't mean to show. Leonard Croft didn't know who Cecelia was. That was the point everyone kept missing. The point, the real point, the one that actually mattered, wasn't that she turned out to be someone important. The point was that it shouldn't have mattered if she wasn't. She was a woman with a valid boarding pass. That was enough. That had always been enough. I want to say that directly, because I think it gets lost in the way these stories travel. The satisfaction of the ending, the HR calls, the 6 business days, the justice that arrived on schedule. I understand why people need that part. I understand why "he got what he deserved" is the comment with the most likes. We need to see the scale balance. We've been watching it tip the wrong way for so long that we hunger for the correction. But Cecelia didn't win because she was the chairman of the board. She was right before anyone knew that. She was right when she was just a woman in a cardigan with a worn suitcase and a valid boarding pass being told to step aside. The power reveal didn't create the injustice. It only made it impossible to ignore. And that is what I keep coming back to. All those years she moved through airports and offices and boardrooms, carrying the knowledge of exactly what she'd built and exactly how little of it people could see when they looked at her. All those times she chose, and it was always a choice to let the truth do the work. Bernard was right. The truth needs more time than the lie. But it gets there. It always gets there.